good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are on the planet and when you're watching. My name's Dwayne Burkhardt, and this is the very first episode of my new video podcast about the world of rugby, primarily New Zealand rugby, but not always. Now, as many of you may have already noticed, I am not from New Zealand, but I'm a big fan of the game, and I've been wanting to learn how to do this sort of thing, so this is how I'm going to learn. I'm going to experiment, I'm going to make mistakes, I'm going to learn, and hopefully get better. My first episode begins at a big time for New Zealand rugby as the National Provincial Cup, otherwise known as the NPC season, kicks off in New Zealand, and of course the Rugby Championship series begins in Mbombela, South Africa, a town name that literally means lots of people gathered in one place, and for this game, I'm sure there will be. But let's start off with the NPC competition in New Zealand because there are some big changes there this year. In years past, the competition was divided into the Premiership and the Championship divisions, which for many years separated the league into two very distinct tiers, but no more. Beginning in 2022, the entire league is trying a new format in which all the teams are part of one big happy family. How will this work? The teams are divided into two conferences, the odds and the evens, based on the rankings of the teams at the end of last season. The teams that finished 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, and 13 last year will be in the odds conference, and the teams that finished 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 14 will be in the evens conference. Each team will play every other team in their conference, plus 4 teams in the other conference. At the end of the regular season, the 4 best teams in each conference will play in quarterfinals. The winners of those games will play each other in the semifinals, which will give you your conference champions, and then the 2 conference champions will play in a grand final match for all the marbles, which is an odd phrase because, of course, there aren't actually any marbles at stake. Anyway, let's have a look at week 1, and please keep in mind that my predictions this week, especially because it's week 1, may be way off because it's a brand new season. The 2022 NPC season will officially kick off on August 5th, which is actually August 4th for those of us here in the USA, because we're trapped in the past, or at least behind the international dateline. Although that does mean that for us, the season starts a day earlier than it does for you, so never mind. In any case, wherever the season begins for you, please check your local listings. I can tell you that it will begin in Palmerston North, where the Manawatu Turbos are going to play host to Canterbury. My prediction for this game? Well, I love the Turbos, and they are at home. And Canterbury has lost at least a couple of games that they really should have won in the last few years. But this isn't going to be one of them. Canterbury wins. There are 3 matches the next day, Saturday for you, Friday for us. First up, Counties Manukau opens their season at home against Otago in one of my absolutely favorite rugby venues in New Zealand. For those who don't know, Counties Manukau Stadium is frankly much smaller than others in New Zealand, but it does have a feature that I absolutely love. One whole side of the stadium is just a hillside for fans to watch the game on. And above the hillside are houses where people can literally just go out on their back porch and watch a professional rugby game. I think this is really, really cool. In fact, if one of those houses goes on the market someday for a price we can afford, don't be surprised if I make an offer. Anyway, who's going to win this game? Well, again, I love small market teams, but I think Otago has too many good players to draw on to lose this game. And the truth is, my favorite Super Rugby team is the Otago-based Highlanders. So for the second game in a row, I'm actually going to go with the road team here and say Otago wins this game. The second game on the second day is my number 1 candidate for Game of the Week and features the defending champion Waikato Club facing off against the Magpies of Hawke's Bay. Now, for those of you who followed the league last year, you know that if only a couple of plays go differently, this game might very well be a rematch of last year's final. Didn't work out that way for the Magpies, so they're going to fly into FMG Stadium in Hamilton with something to prove. But Waikato are the defending champs, and they're at home. Plus, my other favorite team in Super Rugby is the Waikato Chiefs, so I kind of have to go with the defending champs here. Waikato wins at home. Finally, on day 2, we travel up Highway 1 to the famed Eden Park in Auckland for the game which easily involves the shortest commute of the week as Auckland plays host to nearby North Harbour. Now, North Harbour does have some talented players, but in Eden Park, against Auckland, I just can't see it. Auckland wins. So I've chosen 2 road teams and 2 home teams in the first 4 games. Have a look at Sunday now, or again, Saturday for us because, wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey. And we're going to see how the last games work. The first game on Sunday takes us to Taranaki, where the Bulls will play host to Northland Taniwha. Now, interestingly, I can see this game going either way. I think the Bulls could absolutely dominate at home and win this game in a walk, but I could also see how it could end up being a much closer game than many might think. Still, particularly if Kenny Naholo is starting for Taranaki, I just don't see the Bulls losing this game at home, so I'm going to call it for Taranaki. But don't be surprised if the Taniwha don't make it easy. Next up, we have an all-South Island clash between the Tasman Mako and the Southland Stags. I like both of these teams. The Mako have been fun to watch for years, but for those who don't know, I'm originally from Chicago, and I'm from the 60s and 70s, which means that I have a genetic predisposition to like and support hard luck underdog teams. And if there is any team in New Zealand that is a hard luck underdog team, it is the Southland Stags. So my prediction, well, an upset is always possible, but sadly for my friends in Invercargill, I just don't think this is going to be one of those days. In fact, we may very well be hearing the Mako field announcer say, "Woo!" a lot. And for those of you who don't know, that's what he does when the Mako score. Anyway, Tasman wins. Finally, on Sunday, we cross the Cook Strait and we land at Sky Stadium in Wellington, where the Lions are going to play host to the Bay of Plenty Steamers. This is another game that could be a lot closer than many people think. The Lions are going to be at home, and the drive from Taronga to Wellington is a long one. And I know this because I've done it. But unless the Barrett brothers themselves appear and join the Lions squad, I don't see them taking down the Steamers in this game. Bay of Plenty wins. The final game of Week 1, which is to say still technically Week 1, is actually the following Wednesday night in Palmerston North between the Manawatu Turbos and Auckland. Now, I know Turbos fans are not going to want to hear this, but unfortunately my prediction is that you're going to start the season 0-2, and Auckland's going to win that game. That's it for Week 1 in the NPC. Now let's switch up and talk about the Rugby Championship, where the All Blacks are going to be opening up against the defending world champion South African Springboks. The All Blacks are coming into this series still stinging from their first loss to Ireland on New Zealand soil ever, and the first loss of a series in New Zealand in about a quarter century, although I do feel compelled to note that 4 of the Irish starters were actually from New Zealand. So did Ireland beat New Zealand, or did Ireland and New Zealand beat New Zealand? Just a question I think we should ask. I'd also like to note that in the second game in particular, it appeared that Ireland was playing with at least 16 players, including an official. But with that said, the fact is that the All Blacks did not look their best in this series, and they will be looking to right their ship. The Springboks are coming off a similarly troubling series against Wales, and while the Boks did win their series after a convincing 30-14 win in Game 3, they also showed that they too are vulnerable and beatable. The head official for this game is going to be Aussie ref Angus Gardner, one of the best and most experienced officials on the planet, although there have been some games when I have wondered if someone didn't coat the yellow and red cards in his pocket with some kind of itching powder because he keeps reaching for them and pulling them out. But I hope this is not going to be one of those games. The Boks are going to be at home. The All Blacks are without key players, including Brodie Retallick, who suffered a broken cheek in the last game against Ireland and now looks to be out for a couple of months. But despite all the advantage that the Springboks have, I can't not support the All Blacks, right? So, hang on, let me get my... Here we go. New Zealand, the All Blacks win. They win in a shocker in South Africa. There's my prediction. The second game in round 1 of the Rugby Championship features Argentina and Australia. Now, both of these teams are coming off exciting series. The Aussies lost a tough one to England, and the Argentinians pulled off an incredible upset after winning the third game against Scotland in the final moments of the game. The game's in Argentina, and there is perhaps no national rugby team in the world that has come as far as Argentina has come in the last decade. But they're facing an Australian team that is deep and healthy. Nick White recently turned down a motherload of cash in order to remain in Australia and play for the Wallabies in the World Cup next year, although word is that his mustache is still holding out and now wants to negotiate separately. James O'Connor has the potential to be the best number 10 that Australia has had in a very long time. And Taniela Tupou is healthy once again and is still so large that he spends his off-season leasing himself out as one of the Fijian Islands. Argentina is very much for real, and they have to be taken very seriously in international play now. But in this game, I'm going with the Wallabies. Australia wins. And that's it. That's it for my first podcast. I hope you all liked it. Future episodes are going to be longer because we'll have more to talk about. I'm going to continue to learn and experiment with the technology. In the meantime, please feel free to subscribe. And always remember this: sticks and stones may break your bones, but playing rugby will do it far more efficiently. That's all I've got. Have a great week. See you next time. Based on rankings at the end of the... Let's try that again, shall we? That'll be a blooper. That's a blooper. At the end of the regular season, the 4 best teams in each conference will play each other in a quarterfinal. The winners of those teams... try it again. Each team will play all of the other teams... No. But let's start off with the NPC competition because in New Zealand, there are some big changes to the competition this year. That's not the line. Let's stop and clip. My first episode takes place at a time in New Zealand rugby... Back up. Okay. How will this work? Well, the teams are beginning... They're not beginning. They've begun. They're beginning. They've begun. I don't know. All right. I think we're going to stop here. The National Provincial Cup, otherwise known as the NPC season. One more time.